This is Talk Radio.
Keeping you up to date across the UK. Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
Patrick Christys on Talk Radio.
Yes, evening all. It is Patrick Christys here on Talk. Thank you very much for everyone who's been tuning in, texting in, calling in, tweeting in. We are going to be going to the phones shortly for our designated caller section. So you can call up 0344 499 1000. Lots for you to have an opinion on today, as always, and we love to hear every single one of them. Do you think that the unions are trying to cripple Britain? Is that what you think is actually going on? As they've said that they might actually advise their workers to not take part in a government exemption scheme, right? So people like nurses, teachers, transport workers, food deliveries, etc., etc., etc. Well, these people now, even if they've been double jabbed, if they get pinged, they might not be exempt. And this could be an issue, clearly, frankly, for the spine of this country. Is it political? Is it politically motivated? What are your thoughts on that? 03444 99 1000. But now, it's political panel time, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go with Joe Silke, Communications Officer at Bright Blue, a Conservative think tank, going head-to-head with James Meadway, former advisor to John McDonnell. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Great to have you both on board. Let's lead in with the old COVID passports and where we're at with that, really. So apparently you are going to need COVID passports for the workplace. Students are going to need to be double jabbed if they want to dare to attend a lecture, although the way I did university, that didn't seem to matter too much for me anyway. Sporting events, for example. Going to start with you, please, Joe. Is this not an affront to our civil liberties?
I think for certain workers, if you work in health or you work in social care, it makes sense that you'll need to be vaccinated to do those jobs. Your job is to care and protect people. So I think that that's reasonable. I don't think when it comes to other things that is necessarily the right thing to do. I think we do need to increase the vaccination rate among younger people. But I would prefer if we did that through so-called carrots rather than forcing them, things like setting up mass vaccination centres during Freshers Week, maybe even incentivising them by offering them 50 quid. I mean, if you're a fresher, you've come, you want to party, offer them 50 quid. I think most freshers would take that up straight away, get jabbed, protect us all.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way of looking at it. You could do some serious damage at a university Wetherspoons with 50 quid in your pocket. James, I'll throw it over to you now. James Meadway, former advisor on John McDonnell. Keir Starmer seems to be a bit squiffy at the moment on where he is on vaccine passports. I thought he was dead against it. It certainly looks as though he was dead against it, but now he might be for it. What's going on there?
Well, I think Labour's line, and it's the right one to take, and I think there might be a consensus on this, is that vaccine passports are discriminatory. They're not going to work as advertised. This isn't like a magic shield for everyone to just get rid of COVID. And there's huge problems with implementation. The government's own review said this. I mean, just at the start of, the end of June, early July, it's not very clear what's happened in the last few weeks. That suddenly, after being told by their own independent expert review that they need to get more evidence on this, that suddenly we've got all this more evidence and we should go for that. I think there's an opportunity here for Labour to really stake out a claim, saying, look, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work as it's been advertised by government. There's no quick fix solution here. So let's say outright opposition. That's what we need.
Yeah, well, it is what we need. I think a lot of people are clamouring for it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not sure whether or not for Keir Starmer it is about a deep-seated conviction in, being anti-vaccine passport and civil liberties, or maybe a bit of opportunism. But, either way, I don't really care, to be honest with you, as long as he actually sees it through. My question is, do you think he will?
Well, look, the polling on it at the minute says the public broadly are kind of in favour of this. They think perhaps this will work. Now, I think that's going to change. I think it's going to change as it becomes fairly apparent over time what it means to have a functioning vaccine passport system. It's an intrusive surveillance system, one form or another. You need to put in a lot of extra equipment and monitoring, the rest of it, to get it working properly so people don't fake their passports and this sort of thing. And also, once you start saying that, okay, look, your vaccine, it's very good, everyone should get one. It's not a magic shield that stops all outbreaks. It's actually the safety part of this isn't as advertised, and then you throw in the sort of the obvious discrimination that starts to creep in. I think public opinion will shift. It's an opportunity for Labour to lead public opinion rather than try and trail along behind it at this point in time, and that's what they should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. Just the latest COVID numbers for today, by the way, 24,950 cases, which is 15,000 fewer than last Monday. Was also, I say just, obviously every death is an absolute tragedy, but 14 deaths as well. So something is happening, obviously. It does look as though, fingers crossed, the tide is turning, which just begs the question for me, Joe, why the government now is putting forward a thing where actually if you want to get a higher education, you have to be double jabbed. Why do we need this needless infringement of our civil liberties if, to be perfectly honest with you, the tide has turned?
Well, I think these numbers are very encouraging. You're absolutely right. And really, vaccine passports could be said to be a policy failure. Surely, if you've got a very successful vaccination program and also you've got very low incidence rates of transmission, then what's the point of having vaccine passports? I think we wouldn't be in this position in the first place if the government had actually had strong borders and we didn't let Delta into the UK in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose that is certainly one way of looking at it, isn't it? I just want to flip over now to Sajid Javid, which is a phrase that I never thought I'd say. Sajid Javid has obviously apologised, didn't he, for daring to use the word cower. Right? How dare he use that word? He's making light of things, is he? Well, he's apologised for it. James, do you think that you've had enough of politicians just saying something and they're not backing it up, you know?
I think he kind of had to in this place. There was a genuine sort of public outcry about it. The bit that it indicates to me, by the way, is that, look, the government's decided on doing the opening up on the 19th of July. There's a section of the population very keen in it. It's a minority, and you're fine from polling and just talking to people. Most people are a lot more wary about this. So a word like, we shouldn't cower from the virus, now he's trying to explain what he meant by this, I think it's going to set people off. So politically, he was going to apologise for this. He was just too out of touch with how a lot of people are thinking. But perhaps there's a case of saying Sajid Javid ought to be true to his Ayn Rand beliefs and really say what he thinks about these things. We shouldn't cower in the face of viruses or whatever other wild free market ideas he has rattling around that brain of his. Perhaps he should be saying this, but I don't think it would go down too well with the public anytime soon.
Do you buy that, Joe? Do you think that there is actually more fear out there than what people are letting on? Because, look, I've got to be honest with you, I certainly don't feel it. That said, I had a friend of mine, for example, who cancelled his engagement party at the weekend because he thought he might have come into contact with someone who had coronavirus. He hadn't been pinged, but he just thought he might have done, and so actually everyone had to go home, basically. And I think he's my age, there's a bit of that going about. Do you think that James has got a point? There is more fear out there than what maybe there is amongst just our talk radio audience?
Well, yeah, I think there is a degree of hysteria out there. I think there's a certain section of the population which are generally very fearful. I think it tends to align with people who are typically anti-Tory anyway, people who don't like the government, therefore don't really want to accept that things might be getting better. But I also accept the fact that there are people who are genuinely scared of this virus, people who are still vulnerable, and therefore opening up is a scary thing for them. I thought the reaction was a bit over the top to what he said. I don't think he was being cynical. I think it's fine that he apologised if he upset people. I think it's perfectly reasonable for him to say sorry, and people seem to react positively towards that. But I don't think what he said was particularly wrong.
No, I don't think what he said was particularly wrong. And also, just either say it or don't, right? And once it's out there, and this is the thing as well that I have a real concern about, which is that, but what it takes to get an apology out of a minister now is just some angry tweets on Twitter. I mean, I said it earlier, what happens if he proposes a policy that people don't like? So if you lefties on Twitter have a go at him, what does he do? Reverse that then? I mean, you can't have the Twitter sphere running the country. I mean, all too often we see that the Twitter sphere is indeed out of touch with the vast majority of the British public anyway. And so, I was a bit concerned about that. Another thing I am concerned about is the potential role of the unions in the impending collapse of Britain. Okay, it's a bit much. But do you think the unions want to cripple Britain, right? Because this is where we are at the moment. Several trade unions have said they don't want their workers to be in the government exemption scheme, right? So they don't want them to be, if you've double jabbed and you get pinged, right, you can crack on at work, right? And they're saying, things like nurses, doctors, teachers, transport workers, food supply workers, etc., the spine of the nation, right? Actually, they don't want them to be exempt. And I kind of struggle to understand how that can not be political. I want your view on that, James. Is this not a cynical political move from the unions?
Why was it political? Unions are there to look after their members. That's basically why you pay your union dues and why people join up to it. If you've got a union that says, okay, we're concerned about safety in this instance, and also you can see this right away across the economy. Look, as we've released some of the restrictions, there's been a real difficulty getting people into jobs in various different places, and suddenly, for the first time in years, people who work are in a little bit stronger position than they might have been for the last decade or so. A decade, by the way, of flat or falling real wages for most people, insecure work. Now, if people are saying, okay, actually things have turned a little bit in our favour, we're going to try and make sure we get a good deal at work out of that, I think that's absolutely fine. This is what unions should be doing. Politics doesn't come into it, really. This is about economics.
Do you really think that? Because do you really think that they care more about the safety of their workers? For me, part of it definitely is that I think it would be quite convenient for them if essentially they stuck it to Boris Johnson here. I mean, this is not a way of just getting a pay rise.
Look, I've nothing wrong with people in this country doing essential work getting a pay rise. We've had a decade of basically flat wages, average earnings now lower than they were in 2008. Right, that's what most people have experienced. That's insecure work. That's on the back of what's happened in the last 18 months. I don't have a problem at all with people who've been doing essential work, whether it's nurses or lorry drivers or delivery drivers, whoever it might be, saying now's the time for a pay rise. That's a good thing. We know very well that the richest people in this country have done extremely well during the pandemic. The billionaires have done very well out of this. The people in the top 1% have done very well out of this. I think it's high time everybody else saw a bit of that.
What's your view on this one then? Because, it is... look, Joe, I mean, do you think that the unions have a duty now as opposed to kind of get their workers, encourage their workers to take part in this exemption scheme, or do you actually think that they've got a right now to say, well, actually, hang on a minute, if you don't want to take part in it, you don't have to?
I think unions are seeing an opportunity and they're taking it. I don't entirely blame them for that. But I think what this comes back to is the fact that we don't have a test and trace and isolate system which people have faith in. We need to fix this system in which people who are not going to be contagious, aren't going to infect people, can actually come out of isolation. People who have been double jabbed, people who test negative. If we don't have faith in this system, then of course this politics is going to seep through into it. We need to fix the system first. Then there won't be these disputes over whether or not people should take part in these exemption schemes.
Yeah, 87% of our Talk Radio Twitter poll users have said that they do believe that the unions want to cripple Britain. They don't believe that it is just about a matter of public safety. But of course, a range of views, as always, here on Talk Radio and indeed on our political panel. Thank you very much, both of you, for getting on board. It's great to have you. James Meadway there, former advisor to John McDonnell, Joe Silke, as well, communications officer at Bright Blue, a Conservative think tank. Good stuff. Right.